I finally got my Sony A7S III. It took a while, but it's here. So today we're going to check out the cage for the Sony A7S III from SmallRig, together with a couple of accessories to go with it. So let's get right into it. Hey, I'm Scott and welcome to my channel. If you're new here, please do consider subscribing for more no-nonsense tutorials and reviews. So obviously I have taken the cage and the accessories out of the box, but I haven't looked at them in detail yet at all, and of course I haven't tried putting it on the camera. So today we're just going to go ahead and do that, put it on, see how it fits, see how it feels. We'll talk about the connections and things like that on here in a bit more depth, and just we'll see how these accessories work as well, if they're going to be worth it for you or if the cage is enough. But before we get into that, I just want to talk about my thoughts on a cage for this camera in particular, and kind of all cameras in this general form factor by extension. But if you want to skip ahead and just see what's up with the cage, then click on the timeline down below. So I personally went for the A7S III because it is this small, compact, kind of all-in-one form factor. I don't necessarily need anything else. You know, it has a screen built in, a monitor built in, it has the viewfinder built in, it's got autofocus, it's got stabilization, it's got good codec, strong codecs up to 4K 120 frames per second. It's got a good amount of dynamic range too. So this is kind of a great, powerful camera in such a pretty small form factor. So for me, the appeal was that I don't have to rig this up. I can go to a shoot with a relatively small bag and take it out and be ready to shoot pretty much right away. You know, get my white balance and exposure, but pretty much right away without a whole lot of extra time. And I'm often a single shooter. I'm often in situations where I don't have the time to rig up a camera. I have a lot of pressure to just be there on a location and just get out and go shooting. I have to go back and forth between photography and videography. Photography, in most cases, is kind of like just a second side thing, and it's not the main focus. So for me, you know, I know this only has 12 megapixels, but that's enough for those situations. But it can go back and forth between photography and videography, which is nice. And again, it's just ready to go out of the bag. So I'm kind of mixed, in all honesty, on having a cage or having a rig, which obviously a cage leads to a larger rig on this camera. I like the small form factor, I like how it feels in the hand, and I like being able to just take it out and shoot. So again, I'm kind of mixed on this, but there are definitely situations where I would want to have this rigged out, where I would need a cage to build that off of. One of those is if I want to shoot in RAW on the Atomos Ninja 5, which is not necessarily going to give me a whole lot of benefit in terms of like dynamic range or anything like that, but it's a nice codec, and sometimes just recording externally to that larger, maybe cheaper media is nice. You have a larger monitor kind of combined with that at the same time with waveforms and things like that. So there are some benefits to using something like the Ninja V together with this, of course. And that's, you know, great quality ProRes RAW, which is great. But I also often want to use something like this XLR adapter with this. If I'm shooting interviews or something, it's often just easier, again, as a single shooter, to go straight into the XLR adapter, have the audio in there already. I don't have to worry about having somebody else hold and monitor and not mess up a separate audio recorder, because I don't have a sound guy usually. So this is just easier for me, but that takes up the hot shoe, which means if I want to use something like the Ninja V or anything else really, I'm going to need some more connections to get that on there, because this uses the hot shoe. In that case, I'd obviously want to start using the cage, and then from there, there are other situations as well. If I'm using a cinema lens, like the IRIX cinema lenses that I have, for example, I'll probably want to use a follow focus, and that requires rods. So like I have a manual follow focus, and I also have a wireless follow focus from like PD Movie that I got to check out soon. And those require more of a rig, more rods, which requires the cage to build it off of. So there are situations where I find myself needing to build this up just a little bit more. And so again, I went with SmallRig. I've always loved and trusted SmallRig gear. It's not necessarily like the best that I've ever used in all cases. In some cases it is. I thought that this design looked pretty good, so hopefully it is. We're going to get it on there and see if it really is up to the game of being fairly minimal, because again, small camera, I don't want this huge cage. Hopefully it still feels comfortable if I do want to go handheld without having to obviously remove the whole cage. And hopefully there's enough connections that, like I said, I can easily add on things like an extra monitor or the rods on the bottom, you know, with minimal extras, and just hopefully, you know, it's there for everything. There are, of course, other benefits to having a cage too that are maybe less obvious, like, you know, just having multiple screw threads on the bottom, where you could then use 2 screws on a quick release plate for your tripod to avoid it spinning loose. You know, that's something that maybe is not necessarily the first thing in your mind when you think of benefits of a cage, but it's definitely a benefit. So Anyway, let's get through this section and just go ahead, put this on, and then we'll show you kind of how it fits, how it feels, and what is actually built into here in terms of connections and design. So the first thing that I really like about this is that you can see here the screw on the bottom is actually, I can't remember what it's called, but it's one of those screws that it doesn't fall out, which is really nice. You don't have to go searching for the screw. It's just always in there if you take off the cage and then put it back on, which, as I mentioned, I'm probably going to do fairly often because I don't always need this rigged up. So it's good that it's right in there. Something less that I have to remember to bring along. And also you can see on the bottom here, they have this tool. Again, it's one less thing to remember to bring along, one less thing to cause trouble and take time. So that's just magnetically in there right there. You've got that kind of hex wrench connection right on the bottom. You've got the flat section that you could use as a kind of screwdriver for the screw on the bottom or whatever other accessories you're attaching. So that's cool. It's got 3 magnets in there that hold it in place, and it seems to go in easily but not fall out too easily. If you have a tripod plate on there, I will have to check this out if you'd be able to slide it out, but the tripod plate would likely block that just a little bit. So there's that. But it is nice that they included it, which is cool. They have marked on the front and also on the back here where the center is, so that will be like the center of your lens. But oddly enough, they did not mark on the side of the cage where the sensor is. I mean, that's marked on the camera. We'll have to look at if it's actually covered up or not by the cage, but it is marked on the camera where your sensor is, which can be important if you're measuring distance for a manual focus lens. But it's interesting that although they did include the center mark on the front and the back, they didn't include one on the side for where the sensor is. There is also this bit of rubber here inside the bottom to help against it spinning loose, but I believe that this screw on the top corner here will go through the eyelet of the camera, so that will give you a second point of connection there and really avoid this spinning loose on its own, which is nice to have a nice secure fit on your cage so nothing is wobbly. But then you do also have the connection here and also on the other side, because if you use that screw, it'll take up the eyelet on the camera itself, which means that if you want to use a strap, you need to use these. So they do have that covered, which is nice. Let's go ahead and get it on there, and we'll talk about this just a little bit more. If we're going to put this through the eyelet, it's obviously going to get in the way if I don't remove it. So let's remove this little screw here using the tool that was on the bottom of the cage. Ooh, almost lost it. All right, I'm not sure if this is just me, but this little tool that they have on the bottom of the cage that looks like it should be able to be used as a kind of screwdriver for the screw in the bottom is somehow too fat. It doesn't actually fit in the slot on the screw. I don't know if that's going to be on all cages or if it's just mine or whatever, but it doesn't fit. Luckily, I've got one right here. This we can use that tool for. There we go. And that is on there. It's secure. It's not wobbly. That is good. And so again, just to highlight, like I said, we do have a couple of screw threads on the bottom here. It looks like this could obviously be used for some other accessories. It's got those locating pins there, but as well as a 3/8 inch and 1/4 inch screw thread. So if you're just using this straight on a tripod, you've got 2 holes for a tripod plate. That's great. I like using that. We've got full access to the battery door. We can remove that no problem. And that opens up no problem. You've got a loop for a strap there on the bottom near the battery door side, the grip side. If you want to use a hand strap, a grip strap, whatever you want to call it, we can still open the SD card slot door. No problem, it opens all the way. It kind of follows the contour of the grip here, which is pretty nice actually. In all honesty, that's better than I expected it to be. Holding this handheld, it still does not really feel like you have a cage on there. It actually really sits really nicely in your hand, even with the cage on there. I'm actually pretty impressed with that, and I didn't expect it, so that's good. I've also got clear access here to the shutter button, and actually from my pointer finger here, the record button and the C2 button are plenty accessible, no problems there at all. So whether you have record remapped to your shutter button as well, or if you're recording with this record button, it's maybe a little bit less convenient than if you have no cage on there at all, but it's absolutely plenty accessible. No problem whatsoever, if you can see that right there. There's enough clearance here, combined with this height clearance and this front clearance, no problem whatsoever. Also, as a note, you can still see the little icon on the body of the camera to note where your sensor is, so although there is nothing marked on the cage itself, that's no problem. On this side over here, no problem. You've got full access to all of your ports. Of course, these can all open up, no problem. You've got plenty of space there. This side is a NATO rail, so if you have a NATO handle or any other accessories, that use that connection, then you can just slide them on there with no extra accessories. I like that. As far as screw holes with locating pins, for anti-twist locating pins, you've got one in the center on the top here. That's a 3/8 inch screw thread with those locating pins, are your locating pins. And you've got another one on the grip side here. So if you're looking for that type of connection, those are the two that you've got. You've got a cold shoe built in here as well. I'm going to have to try and see. I don't think actually that this XLR connection adapter will fit on there together with a monitor. It's definitely going to be, you know, too wide. This is huge. I hate how huge this is. But, you know, whatever. It's fine. If you're using something smaller, if you're using a wireless microphone receiver, for example, that can probably fit on there and have clearance underneath here. And that would be good. Or any other, you know, whatever accessory. I don't know what you're going to be using. But you do have that there, whether or not you're also using this particular accessory. You've got one more cold shoe right there. And yeah, you can see as I move this around, there are screw threads everywhere. You can look online and see where the screw threads are. I don't need to tell you all that. It feels pretty decent. You know, it's not super duper minimal. It does obviously go out in front of the camera body on this front side here because it needs to leave clearance for all of these connections. It does have quite a bit of height on the top here. It just goes straight across. It's not contoured down towards the body, but again, that leaves you access for these dials and these buttons. The exposure compensation dial here is a little bit difficult to access, but it's not something I really often use. The mode dial here, you can get one finger in behind and one finger in front, and you can still reach that push lock on here. It's, again, not the most convenient. Obviously, less convenient than if you didn't have a cage on there, but it's still, I think, enough clearance that I could reach that and change that with very little difficulty. And, you know, they didn't have a whole lot of space to work with here. There's a lot going on in that top corner, so I think they did a decent job in terms of getting this through there, having enough connections on top for, you know, different types of uses, but still leaving enough clearance for all of that without being overly huge and having an overly excess amount of space between the camera body and the cage itself. So I think they did a pretty good job. Again, it feels good in the hand. I'm impressed. I'm satisfied. This is definitely going to be a cage worth using. One thing here, they don't have any front-facing screw threads. I know some people do like having front-facing screw threads, so you could just screw a rod right into there and mount a follow focus from the top without having to put anything else underneath. With this, you can't unless you have some other accessory, another single rod attachment, for example, that could go up here. If you're one of those people that like having a screw thread on the front, just be aware that they don't have one here. And it does have the label SmallRig up there as well. Some people would rather scratch that off or cover it with tape, but you know, I don't really care. A nice cage, I think, well done. So we're gonna go ahead and check this out. I've got a left-handed grip here that they sent me. It screws into the cage with 2 screws here. They are just thumb screws. You don't need any tools, but they do have little holes in them if you want to take, there's actually one built into here. We'll get to that in a second, but if you want to take a Allen wrench and then put it into that hole, really crank this tight, you can do that. And as you can see, there is also a space up top for that Allen wrench to be hidden away, which is always good. I love being able to have that on me instead of having to go dig one out of my bag. One less thing to forget, again, one less thing to look for. It's right there, which is good. It's hidden away, out of the way. It's not going to accidentally fall out. And on top of there, you do also have 3 screw threads, 1 3/8 and 2 1/4 20, as well as a cold shoe. It's not a locking cold shoe. There's no little snap or anything like that. But again, this is going to probably be a better position if I have, let me get this so you can see this straight on. If I have this XLR adapter on top, I think, depending on the mount, I could probably attach my monitor up on this cold shoe and have enough clearance. Possibly, I'll have to try it out, but I think I'll have enough clearance to mount it on here, so that way I'll have the Ninja V and the XLR adapter, no problem. So that is good. This does also curve out a bit in front, so keep in mind that this cage is kind of in front of the camera body, and then this is going to go even further in front of that. So if you can see here, this is kind of the position that your hands will be if you have one hand on the camera itself and one hand on the grip. They're not going to be aligned with each other. I don't know if that matters, but maybe having this out further front would also give you a little bit more clearance for whatever you have mounted up here. So it could be a good thing, could be a bad thing. But this particular grip, again, does have that curved connection, so it's a little bit further out from the body and also in front. It does also have these screws right here, so you can adjust the height of this connection if you want this to be lower or higher, depending on if you're using it with this cage or a different cage, or again, what you have mounted other than this, or just how you prefer it in terms of actual personal preference. You can adjust that as well. So I like things that are adjustable. It's good to see that this is not just totally in place. It's right it's adjustable completely. And this is a nice wooden grip. It does have some contour on it, like this, as you can see. I believe that there's enough of a lip here that it feels secure in your hand. It's not going to slip out of your hand like that. It is pretty comfortable. It's big enough for my hand. Not huge, not too small. And I like the color of the wood. The wood looks good. Again, personal preference, but that's what it is. Let's go ahead and get it attached to the cage. And that is that. So this is how it would fit. It's going to give you maybe a little bit more stability if you're hand holding this, if you don't need to worry about follow focus or anything like that. Not follow focus, sorry, manual focus. So that will give you a little bit of a sturdier grip. Sometimes having this further out from the center of the body will actually even stabilize it even more. So that's good. I think it feels comfortable. It feels fairly balanced. I think maybe this side of the camera is a little bit heavier because of the battery, maybe, I don't know, but it feels pretty balanced. So that is good. I can sit it down on the table now, again, because I moved this position of this arm down so that way it fits into the cage. But again, personal preference and personal needs. Finally though, we've got one more accessory here for actually the same side of the camera. I'm probably going to remove this just to give you a clearer view, but this is for the HDMI port. And I like the design of this generally. I haven't obviously used it yet, but I think I like it. It's just that single, again, screw that's built into there. It's not going to fall out. It's a thumb screw. It's got that texture to it, so you can grab that and tighten it easy enough. And this is going to both connect it to and tighten down on the HDMI cable there. And this does also have on the side here these anti-rotation pins. So it's only a single screw, but it's not going to rotate loose on you. It's a 1/4 attachment. So let's go ahead and get that attached, see how it lines up with the HDMI port, and we'll see how quick and easy it is to use actually when you plug in an HDMI cable. So again, you've got these two slots right here on the side of this 1/4 screw thread, and that is where you're going to attach this. So it has these anti-rotation pins. Those will sit right inside of those little indentations there, so that way this stays in position. So I'm not sure how well you can see this, but this has that kind of slanted design. So as you screw it down, it's going to automatically kind of slide tighter. So it's not like you have to slide it over, hold it in place, and then tighten down the screw. Screwing it down will actually clamp it down tighter. So as you screw it down all the way, that's as tight as it can be. And then as you loosen it up, it will slide over so you can have space to slide that in. So it will kind of adapt quicker and easier to different sizes of HDMI cable without you having to, again, there hold it in place and screw down at the same time. It is a little bit large, so it kind of blocks the HDMI door. So if I want to go in there with this attached and open that door, I mean, this is a rubber door, so it has a little flex, but it's kind of in the way. There we go. So that's what you're going to be dealing with if you want to close this with this clamp still attached. Otherwise, you're going to have to completely remove it each time you want to open and close this door. Just keep that in mind. Not a big deal, depending on how you're using this, but let's now connect an HDMI cable. This is the ZILR HDMI cable. They're pretty good cables. They're what I've been using since I was working with the Z-Cam. Let's get it in there. And it only took like half a spin there. And that is clamped down. It looks like it's lined up absolutely perfectly as I would expect. And it's clamped down tight, it's secure. That seems good to me. Let's get this all rigged up just to show you. Let's go ahead and do that. And there it is. Obviously this is not necessarily a full setup. You know, you might have a follow focus or a bigger lens. You might have rods underneath. You might have a wireless mic receiver. You might have a wireless video transmitter. I don't know. But basically, you know, this is kind of one example of a setup that you could have. And it's something I wanted to show you because, again, this is a huge accessory here that does need to use the hot shoe on the camera. So, you know, in terms of how much clearance you get, having this handle out at this position literally just gives it just enough clearance, as you can see right there. I mean, that is barely just enough clearance. But it does have clearance to mount your Ninja V right there next to the XLR adapter. You have to tilt it out of the way if you want to open up the audio controls, but you know, you can do it, which is cool. And if you have a monitor mount that will, I'm sorry, this is not a SmallRig monitor mount. If you twist it, you know, you could have a little more clearance because of the angle. Again, I don't know if I'd say this is perfectly balanced in terms of left and right, but you know, it is what it is. And again, if I'm using this particular setup, it's most likely going to be shooting an interview or something where I have a mic coming into the camera here, where I maybe want to record to larger, more cheap, affordable media here because it's a longer form video. So this is not something I'm going to be using all the time, but it was fairly easy to set this up. It took me maybe a minute, so it's not bad in terms of rigging up a camera. And I think that everything here works as it should. Whether or not it's the particular set of accessories that you feel like you want or you need, that's up to you. My one and only real complaint here is that this little guy, the little screw thing on the bottom, was too fat to actually work for the bottom screw in the cage, which is kind of weird. But otherwise, it's a solid cage. I have clearance for everything. The handle is comfortable enough. It gives me a good amount of mounting points for something like a monitor, for example. The HDMI cable clamp is easy and quick. It's a single screw. None of the screws come out, so you don't have to worry about losing anything, except maybe this little tiny one on the side. But otherwise, I think this is a pretty good cage, and I'm happy with it. The grip feels good. If I take off the side handle and all this other stuff, then still just hand holding this with the cage on there is not bad at all, which is a good thing because I am going to be kind of stripping this down and hand holding it quite a lot. So overall, I'm very satisfied with this, and I think that I could strongly recommend it if you're looking for a cage for the Sony A7S III. Anyway, if you have any further questions or comments, please let me know down below and I will do my best to get back to you. And if you like this video or found it helpful, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't already, and as always, thanks for watching.